Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Always lovely to have you here. A wonderful guest here today that I think is going to give us some real perspective about some methodologies that you may or may not have heard of. And I love clinical innovation. I think there's not enough of it. So I'm thrilled to have our guest today. And I'll tell you, we've been chatting before we pressed record, and she's just a lovely human as well and has a super cool necklace. So, all the parts. So let me tell you about our guest today. Tara-Meyer Robson is an award-winning author and the creator of the flow method and body decode method, two groundbreaking science-backed methodologies that reveal the unconscious beliefs driving both mental and physical symptoms. And folks, we're going to talk about that science-backed methodologies. That is really critical. That's what we were just speaking about before I pressed record. Her work bridges the gap between psychology, neuroscience, and mind-body medicine, giving practitioners a clear, structured framework to uncover root causes and accelerate healing. Tara has trained therapists, coaches, and healers worldwide to achieve stunning client results in a fraction of the usual time. How incredible is that? Known for her engaging style and live body decoding demonstrations, she leaves professional audiences inspired and equipped with practical tools they can use immediately. Welcome, Tara-Meyer Robson. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for that beautiful bio.
So you have developed these two powerful approaches, the flow method and body decode method, that are used by practitioners around the world. I mean, that's pretty incredible. Can you give us an overview of how each one of those works? What are they?
Yeah, absolutely. So I should probably back up ever so slightly and say how I even ended up starting to look into this and develop this out, right? Because for me, I was always, as I think as many clinicians, as many therapists and practitioners tend to be, as kids, we tend to be pattern seekers and we tend to be watchers of human nature. We tend to look for connections. And so I would always be the person people would come to, even as a kid, and kind of ask advice. I got the old soul stuff, right? And I just would see I just saw it. It was like a math problem to me for some odd reason. And it was sort of, yeah, so, of course you've got this thing going on now because you had these things going on here. And so that always was just sort of something I did. I didn't think much of it. I think like probably many, many of us that end up in some sort of healing field, right? We just do it. We just don't even know that's something special we do, really. And then all of a sudden, fast forward, and I was working in a family business and right after college, and it was very stressful. And I had some very heavy perfectionistic tendencies, and I was working for my dad, actually, and I love my dad, but it's a lot, right? It can be, I was definitely more worried about just his business and making sure everything was okay. I found myself working, we actually did benefits for large hospital systems was what we did. And so I was oftentimes, teaching nurses about their benefits at 3 a.m. and all of these like crazy hours. So I ended up really kind of driving myself into the ground, to be completely honest. I was working 80 to, and I'm not actually exaggerating, 100-hour weeks easily, all the
Wow.
time. I know. In the meantime,
Exhausting.
it was exhausting. And I didn't know at that point, have now since worked on that, did not know how to put things down. And again, it felt very important to me to make sure everything was fine. My dad's business, we were sort of moving him from a business he'd been affiliated with for a long time. There was just a lot going on, right? And in the meantime, I got married to this wonderful human being I'm still married to 26 years later. And so that was amazing. Also a lot going on. And so in the midst of sort of juggling all those sort of rather big pieces, I guess, I was just starting to get really exhausted. And I started to have really severe pain in my right side. On top of it, I decided this seemed like such a great idea at the time. I am not a runner. I decided to run a marathon for kids with leukemia because I didn't.
You can't put things down, or you couldn't back
I
then.
couldn't.
Wow.
I
Everybody
I
does,
was
right? I'm burnt out. Run a marathon.
what am I doing? Anyways, but I cared and I thought, oh, this is a lovely cause. And so as a non-runner, I'm jogging and I'm whatever, and it's not good. But anyways, I was running. And so I kept having this pain in my side. And you think, well, I'm not a runner. It's probably a stitch in my side. I'm probably just need to get in better shape. And then one day I was on my treadmill downstairs in our basement and I like almost fell off the treadmill because the pain was so severe. And went off to the doctor. And the doctor asked a ton of questions, took a blood test, and it ended up that I had mononucleosis at 26 years old. I'd already had mono in college, so you're not supposed to be able to get mono again, right? I know. The whole thing was like, what? I'm married, so, it's supposed to be the kissing disease. And I'm like, well, I got one guy. And so, none of it made a lot of sense. And here was the thing that got my attention. He said, your spleen is 3 times the size it should be. And if you don't slow down, if you don't stop, you could die. It will burst and you will die. And that's where we're at. Now, I know. And it was such a shock. Here I was like just married maybe a year. And again, still carrying all this stuff, worrying about all these things. And here's the part that was really not my smartest move. I took a half a day off and kept going because I didn't know, I didn't have anybody to backfill for me. I didn't know how to put anything else down. And so, as you can imagine, this was not a great decision. And so I kept sort of pushing myself forward. And I would end up at the end of the week and I would just like sort of fall down and I would basically be barely able to move for the weekend. And then I would get back up and I'd start up again. And it was after that, after doing that for about 6 months, I suddenly was just at the point where I hit a wall and I was like, actually couldn't. I would be able to do stuff for about an hour and then I would just be like really exhausted. At that point, my doctor said, well, now you've got chronic fatigue, and now you're going to have that for the rest of your life. It was very difficult to go through, and I'm exceptionally grateful for it now because I looked, and I'm not great with authority figures telling me that something can't be done. So I thought to myself, I'm this super high energy person, there has to be a connection. And finally, I remembered, and I went back to that natural part of me that knows patterns. And I started thinking, okay, there's got to be a connection here between this insane schedule, the way I'm pushing myself, the unconscious beliefs that are driving this, the nervous system stuff that's driving this, and what my body is telling me right now in this disease. And at that point, that's when I started to listen to what I'd been telling the doctor over and over again. I feel like my circuits are blown. That's what I kept saying. It was like I was actually translating what my body was actually trying to say. I can't have this much stuff plugged into me with no support. No recharging. It's not possible, right? My circuits were literally blown. So at that point, that's when I decided, because once I get sort of a question, I thought, okay, if I can figure out what the connection is here for me, maybe I can heal. And then if I can get that, could I replicate it? Could I help other people with what I find out, right? So I started to go down a path where I researched everything I could get my hands on that could potentially I was just looking for what's the connection between all of these things, right? My husband started calling me the nutty professor because he would somehow, the chronic fatigue kind of got a little better. And I was sort of up at 3 because once I get a question in my head, I have to answer it. So I was up at like 3 in the morning, like, and finding things and connecting. And I had index cards. I looked like a crazy conspiracy theorist, probably. And then one day I picked up my husband's quantum physics book, and I already had sort of a theory about how this aligned. And I was reading all about sort of some quantum physics and some frequency and some of those things. And I had that light bulb moment that I think so many of us have, that you're like, wow, that's the thing. And I can still remember I called my husband, and the poor guy was in a conference, a work call or something. And he's like, that's great, dear. Because I'm babbling.
Glad that's working for you.
So
Because everybody picks up quantum physics to find their solutions in life.
Well, my physics teacher in high school would not believe that I love quantum physics and understand it quite well now, but believe me, I would cry over my stupid mousetrap car. So,
That's incredible.
Yeah, so that's so I ended up actually managing to heal myself of chronic fatigue using the system that I put together. And I don't have chronic fatigue at all anymore. I don't have flare-ups of any kind. For the first couple of years, I did. And I could notice the trigger. I could notice, oh, this is what's going on, and this is the subconscious belief, and this is what's being activated. So that was a very long
Mm.
way to tell you how I sort of discovered what ended up becoming the flow method.
That's incredible. I love the story. The backstory is important because this is out of your own life experience, not just you observing things in clients. You lived this and you were determined to figure out how to heal yourself. So you were the first case study for these methodologies. So I can't wait to hear about what you discovered.
So that's the neat thing. And that was crazy because once I knew that it worked for me, I thought, okay, can I systematize it, right? In a way. So
Mhm.
what the basic discovery is, and I won't go into the big old long, if anybody wants the big old long science thing, they can feel free to send me a note and I will be happy to send it to them because it's actually quite interesting. But the basic idea is that what I figured out is we have sort of 7 areas of our subconscious mind. So we think of the subconscious mind as just kind of one, oh, our subconscious mind, and I have these subconscious beliefs. But what I figured out is actually our subconscious mind sort of bands it into what I call stations. So if you think of them like radio stations, it's you're going to get the same kind of music on a certain radio station that you tune into. You're expecting jazz, you get jazz, right? Our subconscious bands it in the same way. And it also relates to what I figured out, it also relates to in that particular area, which I'll talk about in a second, the kind of patterns of experiences that we have again and again. So, for instance, someone who says, I am never dating a guy like that again, consciously, right? And I'm sure you've seen that as a therapist. People come and, oh my God, how'd I pick this guy again, right? And what I figured out is that's literally that station, which happens to be station 2, is sort of tuned into looking for and matching from somewhat of a frequency standpoint out of all the people they could date. They go, oh, that one matches. That's the one I'm going to play. That's the one that's going to come to me. And it's all on a subconscious level. And what I realized is in those sort of 7 bands, it also relates to parts of the body very specifically. So I'll tell you real quickly. So there's 7 stations, as I say. The first station is station 1. It's from the tailbone down. It has to do with anything to do with groups in our life, our family, our foundation, feeling safe in the world, just all of that stuff that sort of our individual relationship to groups, right? And then as we move up, it's sort of our hips, sexual organs, lowest part of the back, tailbone, all of that sort of area. That is station 2. And station 2 has to do with our individual relationship to other individuals. And that's where we can have some patterns of one-on-one relationships, or you'll see somebody who will move from job to job to job and they keep having the same like toxic boss again and again. Like, how did I keep ending up at this particular thing? And it's just
Mm.
that there's this unconscious belief in that sort of band that is causing a problem. And when you get to the root to it, you can shift it. Station 3 is our individual relationship to ourself. As you can imagine, many of us have self-confidence, self-worth. Much of my stuff, the spleen happened to be in there, was all around in my case or anybody's case, my sense of being allowed to protect yourself, being allowed to stand up for yourself, having a sense of identity that you're allowed to have that's truly yours. So I do see a lot of clients that maybe their families don't accept their identity and that will really deplete them. And then I'll see things like stomach, that's all in the core of the body. So it's stomach, it's kidneys, it's, as I say, pancreas, it's spleen, it's that part of the vertebrae as well. It's that core of the body stuff. So
Mm.
that's where you'll see, and it really is. And it's interesting because when you look at so many traditions, it talks about our center, our hara, right? That's our, right. It's our center of self, right? And that's
Mhm.
really what it is. And then as we move up, we're moving into our emotional center. So it's how we process emotions, what we believe about how we are allowed to experience emotions, whether we are allowed to feel emotions or not. Lots of messaging that people get from, boys don't cry or, you know, girls are too emotional or whatever these things are, right? We take this on unconsciously because we're like little sponges for a lot of our early life. And so then what that relates to is you'll see heart tissues, you will see ribs, you will see breast. I work with a lot of breast cancer patients. You will see breast cancer, you'll see lung cancer, you will see shoulders, all the way down the arms and the hands, which when we think about it, it makes sense. We show our emotions with our arms and our hands. We can punch, we can hug. So it makes a lot of sense. That's the extension of that. And then as we move up, we're moving into our voice, our ability to express ourselves. That's station 5. And that has to do with like our jaw, obviously our vocal cords, esophagus. So things like I see reflux a lot is one of them, or vocal cord nodes, those kinds of things, vertebrae issues where they're having compression or herniated discs, those kinds of things. And all of that has to do with our ability to feel like we can speak what we need to, we can put voice to things. I'll see people have sore throats only around certain people. That's usually that sort of squashed voice, right? And so also our ability to take positive actions. So I'll see people who think they procrastinate a lot, and it's really about them feeling like they literally can't take action in a way that shows their intention and their voice in the world. So that's really interesting. And then as we go up, it's station 6, and that has to do with like our sinuses, our nose, our eyes, our ears. So a lot of our senses happen to be in this one, but also our, third eye or intuition. However, when people think intuition's woo-woo, it's really not. We all have intuition. Some of us just have more than others, or we've developed it more, but we all have it. It's biologically needed. So what station 6 has to do with is our connection with mental intuition, with problem solving, with being able to detach from things. So sometimes people will get very super attached and focused to a certain thing, or they'll have micro control issues where they need to control something. And that often has to do with that. I've had clients who were told they weren't smart enough. And so then they go through their life and they keep having experience after experience that proves that they're not smart enough because it's what they literally believe. I get a lot of men with migraines because they've been told not to trust their intuition. And it's literally like the intuition's trying to kind of come through and they're pushing it back. So that's an interesting one. And then 7 is really interesting as well. It's our connection. So where station 1 is our connection to the groups in our life, station 7 is our connection to sort of the web of life. So whatever somewhat higher power, universe, having a sense of life purpose is a big one here. So what I'll see here specifically is systemic issues. So it's breakdowns of whole systems of communication. So I've actually seen more lately because the world's a bit crazy of station 7 than I normally do, right? Because we have whole systems of communication that are causing problems. So I'll see MS, I'll see Parkinson's, so you'll see muscular and full cardiovascular system, full skin system. So something like psoriasis over the whole body is telling you very specifically some stuff. But again, that sense of I'll also see like loss of purpose. And so I'll see fatigue, I'll see exhaustion, I'll see depression that doesn't have a medical cause, again, and I want to say this, I am very much a science person. Please get diagnosed for things. But if things have been checked out and there's just does not seem to be any kind of medical cause for this all over malaise or fatigue, I'm looking probably in station 7 and maybe root someplace else to figure that out. So that's sort of the flow method. I feel like the best part of it is that I developed what I call a flow factor assessment. And so either a client or a practitioner or a therapist can use this and they have their client take it and it will pinpoint in exactly which of these 7 areas of their mind, body, and life that they have the out of the flow beliefs. So it's literally sort of bypassing the conscious mind as much as we possibly can. As long as people are taking it quick and, they need to go through it quickly and not overthink, then we're getting real answers. And oftentimes when the body is speaking, so it has an assessment for body issues or pain, things that might be showing up, it's going to really tell us where that root is. And so you can go right to that root and start working right where somebody needs it immediately. So that's sort of the flow method in a somewhat large nutshell.
It's incredible. That's really taking where is this belief? What is the belief? How is it manifesting in your body, in your brain, your body, and your nervous system? It's incredible. And then once you can identify that, you're not, I mean, in therapy, as we know, can be kind of meandering, and we're talking about the issue of the week, and, all of that happens.
Of course.
But this just sort of gives you a real clear map of boom, let's go over here. So, for example, if someone had like just unexplained chest pain that they've had
Indeed.
checked out, this is
Mhm.
not me, by the way, but if somebody did, you would say what? I mean, you would then say,
Yes.
okay, so that is what?
Yes, exactly. So that's a great example. So unexplained chest, again, checked out.
Checked
And
out,
they don't,
always checked out, right?
yeah, and I've had a bunch of, I think the most common thing is people come to me or now to my practitioners as certified, and they're like, I've been looking for answers for 12 years. I've been looking for answers for 15 years, right? Because there's something else going on. But chest pain, and specifically, what you'd want to look at first is what kind of pain. So the kind of pain in particular is going to tell you exactly what's going on. It's often incredibly literal. Like I'm stunned, even 17, 18 years of doing this. The body is literally telling you what's up. But in general, if we're looking at chest pain, we're looking immediately at what is going on, blocking that person's ability to fully feel emotions. Now,
Mhm.
sometimes one of the things I really like to look at in something like a chest pain is when did it start? And the really interesting thing is, depending on when it started and sort of the severity of it, if we're rating the severity, you can actually pinpoint the exact negative experience or perhaps traumatic experience that started the disease process down, like literally down to a window. And that is really wild. I mean, I'll tell you a very quick example of that I was blown away by. Went over to Romania because my book was translated to Romanian, and they are lovely, amazing people. And I didn't know the language. I tried. I learned some. It's quite a difficult language.
And you for trying.
Oh my gosh. I can say multimask. Yeah, it's a really challenging language. However, I learned some, but not enough to translate anything for anyone. My lovely publisher was translating for me, and I met this amazing, wonderful man, big love bug bear of a man, just kind, and you could just tell, right? He sits down and he starts telling me actually he was having chest pains. He'd been checked out. They thought it was a heart attack. There was no heart attack, all of that. And he started about 4 months prior. And I was like, okay. And the kind of pain was gripping and the kind of pain was sharp. So it was like a stabbing or a sharp pain. And I said, okay, so 4 months ago. So I said, okay, between 4 and 6 months ago, when did you have something happen that made you feel like you were really attacked emotionally in a way that was shocking to you? Because if it's that gripping is fear, it made you feel fearful. It made you feel maybe even angry, but definitely fearful. And he looked at me and he had gotten engaged 6 months prior. Wonderful, lovely woman, thankfully. But his ex-wife started an absolute campaign of hate at that point. And needless to say, not only was he feeling it for himself, but now he's feeling it for this woman who truly was, I met her and she's amazing, was like incredible. But that's how specific it can be. He literally felt stabbed, he felt attacked, and his body was responding with that response. And it was very so intense, he went to the hospital for it. So, yeah.
And then how did you go about helping him? So you're able to identify
Yep.
that incident. I think
Yeah.
about, we had talked about EMDR prior to starting,
Yes.
and I kind of do that process of let your mind flow backward when
Yes.
somebody comes with a symptom, and then we'll do some EMDR and sets on that. But from the flow method, how would you then address the fact that, okay, so this horrible event happened? Now what?
Yes, exactly. So then at that point, I have a real process. So I'm sort of doing of course, with him on the fly because I know it. But at that point, you're going into, I have all these intake forms that are very specific for each station. And in that case, you'd be going through station 4. So what you've identified there is that is the trigger event. That is the negative thing. That is the emotion. So we're going to look at some things. One, talking it out, how he actually feels. Two, looking at, okay, what are your beliefs around your power to be able to stop some of these things? Because some of the things will be shock because he feels like he cannot stop what's happening, for instance, in this particular case. The next
Mhm.
thing is I'll be doing probably some guided practices to help him to start to feel like he has the right to protect himself. So literally things like bringing maybe from the heart, bringing energy all the way out, or light, whatever he wants to call it, doesn't matter. Whatever his, I usually work with however that person's imagery works best. And so he would be creating sort of this empowered shield so he doesn't feel like he has to take that on all the time. And then we'd also be
Mhm.
looking at strategies for how do you then in real day-to-day life change the way that this interaction is happening? How do you pull back? What boundaries are you looking at in this particular case? So each sort of process is sort of slightly different, but there's a step-by-step method that I take people through. I will say I did give him a bunch of those things, and he did write me about 2.5 or 3 weeks later and let me know that he actually did not have any more of that pain at all and was feeling so much more joyful. I think he felt also like he just couldn't be joyful in a moment. He should truly be joyful. He was just a sweetheart also. He also felt the burden of like hurting his
Oh.
ex-wife, even though she was kind of a difficult human. Right. And so it was all of that. So a lot of times that I'll see that with really empathic people, they'll be taking on something like that isn't really theirs to
Mm.
carry. And then we work from there as well.
Mm. It's lovely. And so you've written about this, and this is a book that you have published.
Indeed. It's called the Flow Method 40 Days to Total Life Transformation. And that shows the entire flow method start to finish. And, the funny thing is, I actually thought when I wrote it, I did such a good job, nobody would ever need me. So,
It's just the beginning.
because they have the test. And then it takes
Mm.
them right to this exactly. So there's no, I'm not a wasted time person, as you might be able to tell.
Mhm.
So it goes right to this. So you take your test, and maybe you're station one. You go right to station one in the workbook. It takes you step by step by step through exactly finding exactly the specific underlying belief that's causing the problem. And then I give you specifically how to retune that particular underlying belief. Because a lot of times, and you've probably seen this too, well, maybe somebody will start an affirmation and maybe it's like, I am successful in all ways, which is a great affirmation, right? But if their actual belief is, I have to kill myself to be successful,
Mhm.
that's not going to work.
Right.
Because
Like work yourself to death.
indeed, so this
Yeah.
that I am successful in all ways is one frequency, and I am going to have to kill myself to be successful
Yeah.
is a completely different one. So it's literally not recoding the neural pathways is what we're sort of going for here, actually making
Mhm.
dramatic shifts with that. And so what you'd want to do instead is something along the lines of moving to success is easy. I thrive in success, right? Something
Mm.
more, let's cancel that out. And so, yeah, I thought I did. And then there's even a second assessment, which is part of the flow method, that identifies which senses people use in the strongest ways to take on new information. And I did that because I realized like I happen to be a very visual person. If I close my eyes and somebody tells me to visualize something, it's a movie screen, right? Are you more visual? Are you able to do
Oh,
that?
yes, very
Okay.
much so. Mhm.
Right. And
I
it's
am
lovely.
nodding, nodding quite robustly. Yes.
Yes, it's very lovely. I love it, actually. I love being able to do that. My husband, on the other hand, is not a visual learner. So if we
Mm.
would say, go to a yoga class, and the lovely instructor would say, oh, visualize, yourself walking in a lovely field, he would be like blank. And
Yeah.
so I thought to myself, well, okay, if we're giving people only a certain kind of exercise or a one size fits all exercise, then it's not going to work for a bunch of people because you see
Right.
people starting to do one system and it works great. Another person does that exact same system and it doesn't work. And I'm like, what is going
Mhm.
what is that? What's that factor? So the reality type test I call it, which is how we assess and kind of experience reality, what's our strongest senses, looks at that. And so it identifies in the top two senses that you use to learn new information. And
Mm.
then at that point, you create a set. I take again in the book. Thought I did a really great job with it. You go all the way through. It actually takes you through the process of, okay, you're a sight-oriented person. You're going to combine everything we just did in that workbook with this, and we're going to put exercises that work in a visual way. We're going to find cues for you. So, like, if I said to you, what is the color of safety? What would you say? Do you have a color of safety?
Mm. Boy, for me, it would be kind of a white. I mean, the
Yeah.
visual is this beautiful bubble with
Yes,
little rainbow areas around it, but just, very soft, but very sturdy.
ex-
Yeah,
love.
I'm just kind of in my little bubble. Yeah.
I see that's exactly it. And for me, it would be maybe more teal I go for, I think, and still a
Mm,
bubble, sort of a Glinda Wicked bubble. If I gave you an exercise, like you were working on safety, and I gave you an exercise that was like, okay, I want you to imagine a bright red bubble around you. It doesn't carry the same weight. It's not going to work for you in the
ah,
same way. You see?
right,
Right?
right.
And
Hmm.
so I will see people are like, somebody is really overwhelmed. They want to help them relax or calm down. And, oh, use some lavender oil. Well, what if your mom wore lavender oil and she was horrifying? Like, right? So
That's right. Right? That'd be bad.
real bad, really against what we're trying to do there, right? So I take people through a step by step for each of their senses or their top senses to say, basically create sort of a kit for themselves on this is what I'm working on. These are the sensory cues I need. And I'm going to combine that with this workbook with I call them retuning statements because they're sort of specific affirmations to shift specific beliefs and literally retune them. And there you go. And now you work with them, and suddenly, you start seeing, thankfully, really big shifts for people.
Hmm. That's wonderful. I've been doing this work for over 30 years and have studied somatic experiencing and EMDR and some other methodologies. And I love this. I'm going to get this book for sure. And folks will have the information in the show notes about how you can get it as well. You know what, Tara, this is incredible information. I feel like we're just sort of scratching the surface. We didn't even get to talk about the body decode
I
method.
know, I'm
So
sorry.
right. No, please don't apologize. You have brought, I think, just such an incredible description of this way of working, and that the folks who are listening can take this and do something with it, get the book. And just to kind of finish us out for this topic, and if you would please come back again,
I'd love
we
to.
must do a part two if you're up for it. I would love it.
I,
But when you were talking about how, oh, I thought if I wrote all of this out, wow, then people wouldn't need me. Well, it sounds like that's not exactly true, that this is a guide, but the therapist is still important in the process. So can you just speak to that? And then let's set up another time.
oh, I'd love to come back. But yes, that was the funny thing. I thought I had been so comprehensive in this system. And what I found very quickly is, of course, most people actually do need guidance, step by step. They need some help figuring things out, certainly when it comes to the body and translating what's going on, no matter how comprehensive I might be with any of that. Still, there's so much nuance. And so that's where I'm actually training. In fact, I had therapists, in fact, in Romania originally who were like, can you please create a practitioner certification? And I was just so nervous. Could I teach someone how to do this? Was it possible to teach it properly? Could I replicate it? Right. And so it took me 10 years. I'm not even joking. It took me 10 years to just go through it, make sure that I had every little nuance as much as I possibly could. Of course, it evolves, taken care of. And so now I am training practitioners around the world. What is my delight in that is that each person, I fully believe each and every one of us has our sort of soul gifts, that we are here in a soul group. We're here to help, right? And I basically take people with different soul gifts and I say, okay, for instance, one wonderful man is intended to work with visionary entrepreneurs. He's just unbelievable. And so I have trained him in the full methodology and he's incredible at it, but he's using it now in this really, he's wrapping his gifts around it and using it for visionary entrepreneurs, which is a group, is not my group, is not who I tend to work with. But now someone's out there doing this work and impacting people that I'll probably never meet. And he's using it from his true soul, his true purpose in this world. Another lovely woman that's in there now, she was an incredible voice coach. She trains Broadway stars and all these things. And she's come in and she's specifically working on it and is doing incredible work now on specifically helping people be empowered around their voice. So she's using all of
Mm,
her training as a voice coach and now taking all of everything that I've trained her as far as what the body is saying and the emotional connections. And now she has this incredibly powerful thing that is sort of her methodology wrapped around what I've trained her. So that's the
Mhm.
incredible thing. I feel like that's the thing that just brings me the most joy is that seeing each, and we were talking before, I go quite slowly on bringing people in. And there's a reason because I really want to make sure that each and every person, when they come in, I see who they are. And then I can really make sure that they are the kind of person who's going to be able to be incredibly well trained and go out and see really amazing results. The thing that delights me the most is that every practitioner who's come through, and this was the thing I thought I wasn't going to be able to do. Every single one has said, I'm able to decipher the message behind anybody's like pain, disease, or even emotional root in about 1 to 3 minutes. And I
Mhm.
literally test them on that, which I know sounds completely crazy. I do it really organically. So I thought, can I teach someone to do this?
Mhm.
And it turns out I can. It's sort of when a switch flips in your brain and you can see everything through that lens, you can just
Mhm.
work really quickly. So,
Mhm.
anyways, as I say, that's sort of the thing.
Oh,
Oh,
well, I'll
thank you.
tell you, Tara, I mean, you are doing what delights you. You really were very brave to go forward with this methodology that you believed in. And your work is so rich, and you're so committed to this way of working and of making sure that there is just really good quality in the people that you're training. And you love it. And boy,
I do.
don't we all need that. Well, Tara-Meyer Robson, thank you so much for joining us today. This is incredible. We're going to have all your information in our show notes. If someone does want to get in touch with you, though, what is the best way for them to find you?
Sure. They can just go, excuse me, head to my website, which is tarameyer So TARAMEYERROBSON.com. And I absolutely love to hear from people. So if anybody has questions about, I do kind of geek out on the science. Most people don't want to, but I think therapists and clinicians might. So if anybody
Indeed.
wants to geek
Mhm.
out with me on it, I'm happy to provide some of my published papers and things on the actual methodology. And it is really interesting, I think.
Incredible. Well, I
Thank
would be
you.
one who would be interested, so I'll be sending you an email.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all of your wisdom. And all of you who have been listening, thank you. I think hopefully you got a lot out of this conversation. I know I did. So thank you all for joining us. Tara, thank you for joining us. And I really do want to set us up for a part two. There's so many more questions I have.
I'd love
So
to.
that'd be great. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Be well.